you might want to raise for clarity. I did mention the pressures on the time of the presiding officers at this moment, so let's make the most of this time. Perhaps we might just take one round of questions very quickly before we release them to attend to pressing issues. Okay, I've got, let me see by a show of hands. Okay, there's 5 hands. Shall we start with you, Lester, and Desiwe? Yes, you, ma'am. And then Denise. There was a 5th one. Babalo, Denze, in that order. Oh, all right, yes. We'll take your question also. So we've got 6 questions. Lester, you want to start?
Madam, it is Lester from ANC. I just want to know from you in the chair, did you hear the sound outside of students outside the National Assembly? Did you hear the stun grenades go off, and what was your reaction? And what is then the procedure in suspending Parliament, noting this environment that's happening just literally a few meters away?
Okay, we'll note those questions. We'll just take the questions in that order, and then the presiding officers will respond after the full round of questions shall have been asked. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Rebecca from Daily Maverick. Do today's events have particular implications for Parliament's security? Is it a point of concern that students were apparently very easily able to broach the gates and enter the precinct? Thanks.
Andesiwe?
Andesiwe Makina from City Press. Do we know how it happened? How did the students manage to break through and get into the precinct? Would you tell us what exactly is Parliament going to do in addressing the issue of the fee increases? Are you going to have a special, program? Because we do have a Committee of Higher Education that I understand dealt with the matter even this morning. So what more are you going to do as Parliament? Can you tell us the number of students that were arrested and the injuries, and what kind of injuries are you talking about? Thanks.
Denise?
No, Andesiwe was just asked both mine. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Babalo? Okay. Yes.
Bulilani from SABC. Chairperson, often times we hear that this is a people's parliament, notwithstanding the fact that the students entered, the precinct illegally, so to speak. But from where I stood, I think there was no threat of violence. But do you feel that it was necessary for the police to be, throwing around stun grenades? And secondly, have you received any reports whether there were any rubber bullets that were fired to the students? Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. The presiding officers will respond to the questions that have been raised.
Thank you very much. Good evening. The question specifically that was asked related to whether, as the presiding officer at the time, did I hear any noise or any sound? Indeed, I didn't hear anything. As you'd recall that what had happened in the beginning of the sitting, there was a proposal made by the Economic Freedom Fighters about the suspension of Parliament of the sitting today in order to allow for the committees to look at the budget review recommendations report in line with the concerns that the students were raising. Other political parties responded to that proposal by saying they don't agree, they don't support it, because in their view, the tabling of the medium budget policy statement would allow them to have an insight of what allocations have been earmarked, so that when the committees have to look at this process as it was going to be referred to, they will then be able to make their inputs. It went on and on, EFF members still arguing for the suspension, to a point that we had to call for a vote on the motion that they were proposing in order to allow the House to proceed. And indeed, they were then removed from the Assembly because they resisted to comply with the rules. It was thereafter that the minister started addressing Parliament. So I did not hear of the screams sitting at the chair. We were then advised at the end of the sitting that members should go into their offices because in the precinct, the police were managing the access by the students. Thank you very much.
There's a question about the ease with which the students were able to gain access to Parliament and whether we are worried about security around Parliament. Well, there are incidents across the world where parliaments are beginning to take security around Parliament seriously. Are we specifically worried because today the students managed to push the gates open? I don't think we should. I think we should remember that we were once students ourselves. I think we should also remember that Parliament was not per se the target for today's event. We simply happened to be the venue where the executive was going to be in. The fact that the students immediately on arrival at Parliament made their requests to be addressed by the specific ministers says that to us. Is it a concern? Yes, of course it is a concern. We'll get the gates fixed. Does that change Parliament as a people's parliament? No, it shouldn't. In fact, we should, as Parliament, be honored that every South African citizen who is unhappy does make it to Parliament, whether it is a petition on salaries which were not paid or pensions, or, as today, students who are unhappy with the ever-escalating cost of education. What we need to do is to look at how we can use Parliament's mechanisms. We've got committees which are looking at empowerment of youths. We've got committees on education. We've got committees which generally, and other mechanisms like sectoral parliaments on young people and so on. What we need to do is ensure that those committees, those processes, those systems in Parliament begin to get closer to the issues which led to the incidents of today. That through these mechanisms of Parliament, issues around the escalating cost of education are addressed, issues around just how effective NSFAS is addressed, and through these committees, Parliament can then make recommendations to the executive to deal with the matter. You've also asked us whether it was necessary for the students who marched to Parliament to be removed. We must point out that this march was a student march out there in the streets, that Parliament had not been officially told that the students were going to march on Parliament, that as soon as there are marches which have not been condoned, that the police automatically get onto the streets to make sure that life and limb is protected. And we want to understand that the members of the public order policing were therefore outside the perimeters of Parliament because such a march had started. You also asked us whether we have the figures of how many students have been arrested and how many have been injured. We are not sure how many have been arrested. A figure of 7 has been mentioned, but we want to be given chance to meet up with the police to get exactly what has happened. As I say, we had not expecting children, the young people, to come and be injured on our doorstep. You have also said, was it necessary to use rubber bullets? As far as we are concerned, no rubber bullets were used. We have specifically asked the police whether they used tear gas. They have assured us that they did not use tear gas, that they used stun grenades, and that one student in particular was injured in the feet because the canister landed on his tekis and bent him. So those, exactly how many are injured and exactly how many have been arrested is something which after this meeting we will be following up on. Ma'am.
Unfortunately, there is no other specific question which the chairperson hasn't addressed, except that the one on the People's Parliament. Indeed, it remains so, but we all know that the issues of access are actually regulated, particularly if people want to become members in the gallery. They would request the tickets to be able to be in the gallery. So such requests, unfortunately, were not received. So we wouldn't have known as Parliament that we must cater for people. Those who were in the gallery, they had actually followed the processes that are followed normally.
Thank you very much. I thought we had agreed that we were going to have a round of questions. Babalo, you have been covered. I suppose it's a new thing. Shall we take the final two hands? Final two hands. I beg your indulgence in this regard, ladies and gentlemen. Babalo, and then Andy Seward for the final question. Mary Ann Merton. I am sure there will be no other question. Babalo?
Thank you. Babalo from the Sunday Times. Just on parliamentary processes, as far as funding for tertiary education is concerned, higher education, how possible or likely is a special sitting to deal with a special appropriation bill, like what happened with ESCOM? I know the EFF, for example, has said that a short-term solution or the immediate solution would, if we are really serious about this funding matter, would be to maybe come back as Parliament and have a special sitting. How possible is that? Is that something that is, could be under consideration? Thank you.
And this way.
I don't know if I missed the answer to my question on whether Parliament will have a special program to deal with the fee increases, because the chairperson mentioned it earlier, and I asked, are you going to do more on top, anything on top of what the committee is already doing, the Committee on Higher Education? So I wanted to know if there is something special that you'll be doing to deal with this issue before 2016. But can I also ask, ma'am, when the students arrived in Parliament around 11:30 this morning, I think an hour later, the Deputy Secretary and the spokesperson of Parliament were outside where the students were protesting. That was about an hour and a half before the sitting. What happened during that period? When the students arrived, they said they want to speak to the minister. What did Parliament do? Was there anything that was done? And lastly, on the EFF, are they suspended? What is the way forward with the EFF MPs that were chucked out of the House?
Okay, final single question from Mary Ann.
It's really just a clarification. Marianne Merton, Independent Newspapers. When the chairperson of the NCOP says that it is normal for public order police to be outside of the gates, did I hear that correctly? And perhaps there could be an explanation or a clarification on how those public order police officers ended up in their body armor and their shields and their stun grenades inside the parliamentary precinct. Thank you.
Could I deal with the last question? I said that in any instance where marches have not been condoned, the police keep an eye, because that in South Africa, unfortunately, is classified as illegal marches. Therefore, police they try and protect. That was not by way of saying it is normal for the police to have been around Parliament. I was trying to broaden that out. And I want to say that it would be difficult for Parliament to say that it knew that they were in body whatevers. We didn't. We heard that the students were marching right across the country. There was also unconfirmed reports that students might come to Parliament, unconfirmed. Nobody approached us to say the students indeed are coming. Had we been given such a report, I can assure you we would have been ready with somebody to take a memorandum or to address if the students had wanted to address Parliament. What we learned was that the students came to Parliament because they made a request as they arrived to be addressed by the minister. You are asking us what we did, ma'am. I think as soon as Parliament was made aware, a message was sent to the minister. I cannot respond there because I don't know exactly where the minister was, but I do know that the Deputy Secretary did send such a message to the minister. And I think it is also common cause that as soon as the sitting was ended, he went to the students. That's all we can say on that. You've also asked us what extraordinary arrangements we are going to make sure that Parliament deals with a special program to deal with fee increases. I don't want to speculate. I think what will happen is that parliamentary committees that are looking at all matters education and young youth development and economic development will look at the matter. There is no way that Parliament is going to be immune to a match like today. So in the course of their work, they might want to prioritize this matter. The department might want to be upfront with the committees and come and talk about the issue which since last year the young people in this country have been raising, the issues around NSFAS. And I'm saying that Parliament, through those interactions with the departments, might then make recommendations which through the houses might go to the ministers. The one on the EFF? I think the EFF was asked to observe the rules, and I think that the acting speaker called on Parliament Security Services, that the EFF was then taken out. I am not sure that I heard that they were suspended. That would be a matter which the National Assembly will look at, but we will also remember that all of us are expected to understand but also stay within the rules of Parliament. Meditiza, do you want to add?
Thank you very much. In terms of the rules, indeed, when members are asked to leave the assembly as well as the precinct, given that they have not complied with the rules, they are then given a number of days out of which they won't come back to the house, and then at the appropriate time they will be allowed back. So that's not a suspension. I can't give you right now the exact number. But also just to say, today, the medium-term budget policy statement gives the framework for the allocation of resources by the executive. After tabling, it goes to the Appropriation Committee and the Standing Committee on Finance, gets deliberated upon by those committees which have got all the representatives of parties. They are not barred to look at one issue or the other, so all the issues that relate to funding allocations are looked by those committees. If there are any proposals of some interventions that public representatives through that committee or those committees would like to make, they will make those. And they will then come back to Parliament by the 20th of November. It was for that reason that other parties were appealing to the EFF that they allowed the process of the minister to table the medium budget policy statement so that they can have a sense of what currently had been earmarked for education and higher education in particular, so that they can use the process of engagement before the 28th of November to see to what extent can they factor in the concerns that have been raised. So members of parliament through those committees, as Honorable Modise was saying, they would engage. But in our view, the issues that have been raised by students go beyond also just the increased fee. It's about issues of the funding model of higher education by the state, and also to look at issues of equity and access. And also looking at the current instruments such as NSFAS, whether is it working as all of us might have hoped to in terms of assisting those who may not be able to afford higher education fees in particular. So if you look at the body of the concerns that have been raised by students, as we've all been listening to, they go beyond just the hike of 2016. And it is for that reason that the Honorable Modise says, Parliament, having also listened to all of these concerns, would use the portfolio committees to reflect on this matter, some of which might require Parliament to even relook at the legislative arrangement, whether the way it is, does it actually allow even the executive to intervene where such challenges are. So if, in our view, the committees will engage with this issue and appropriately recommend through Parliament to the executive what, in the view of Parliament, they would like to do. Secondly, those of you who might have been in the House at the time when we started, I did indicate that the EFF, the IFP, and the Democratic Alliance had already written to the Speaker requesting that in the coming week, one of the days of the sitting, there should be a debate looking at this matter of the challenges that we're experiencing in our higher education institution. That in itself is a way in which Parliament is saying we would like to also reflect and engage and see to what extent we can make some of the recommendation, or rather express our view on what we think is at the root of the problem in terms of what we've just experienced as a country. Thank you very much.
We are advised that in terms of the rules of the National Assembly, any member or any party that is thrown out of the House will stay out in terms of those rules for a maximum of 5 days.
Presiding officers, thank you very much for dropping everything and making time to address the matter. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your attendance. The press conference is now adjourned.
We live in a digital era, and the number of Africans with mobile phones is rapidly increasing.
Twitter use is predominantly being done on smartphones. This is a very African phenomenon.
Here, there are constantly new innovative ways to make the internet more affordable. With that, we're seeing protests against governments proposing methods to limit access. On Network, we give you information about all of this. We also have new computers, games, and robots.
Join Siphumelele Zondi on Network every Sunday at 19:30 CAT.
Media Monitor, the title says it all. Can we really afford more job losses at such a critical time in our economy? Join our panel of experts as they unpack and monitor all the leading and breaking news stories making waves in the print and social media platforms. It seems we don't have a famous son-in-law any longer. Levi, what do you say to this? An A-lister.
I'll leave this one to Levi. He's the romantic.
watch Media Monitor with me, Alicia Jali, Sundays at 9 a.m. only on the SABC News channel.
About inequality, but it's something that we know as South Africans: poverty, inequality, and unemployment.
Okay.
They contribute to people not being able to access important institutions that will lift up not just individuals, given the nature of our culture, but a whole family and whole communities.
Okay, I want to just welcome all our viewers who have been watching probably other programs as well. But right now we'll be taking your calls live, and if you've got questions, we've got the SASCO Deputy President here. We also have Professor Tawana Cooper from the Wits University. The numbers to dial is 089-1104-210. Now, what happened in Cape Town today really puts this on another level.
What happened in Cape Town is what we've always argued against. I remember at some point I came here after the so-called violent protests of students.
Yes.
And I've always said this, that students in their nature are peaceful. Students in their nature are peaceful, but there are instances where the intervention of the police leads to violence. There's been protests since since last week Wednesday until today. But because of the minimal presence and role of the police in that protest, there's not been any damages, burning of properties and casualties, people being taken to hospital. You see it in the videos. I was watching it here in the SABC studio, what happens in Parliament. When police starts to use aggression to try to control the crowds there. What students wanted there was the minister to come and speak to them, and the gates were refused to be opened. When you refuse to open our gates, we open them ourselves without any apology, because we are not a threat to this government of the day. It's our government of the people, elected by the people. Us who participate in election, we've elected our public representatives, and they are accountable to us. So when you say come and speak to us, you must there not lock those gates that belongs to us. We believe universities are doing by raising fees. We believe that they're locking the gates to those who can afford them. So that was a mistake. But we see it in Parliament, and this is what has happened. In NNMU, students were shot. In University of Limpopo Teflop, students were shot. And this, we've called, also because it's us who called the national protest. There have been 4 institutions marching: Wits, UCT, Stellenbosch, as well as Rhodes. But SASCO took out a call to say we are declaring Wednesday as a national shutdown. And we're happy that other student formations, TASO joined in, EFF joined in on the national shutdown. But we're seeing now, we're seeing the aggression of the police, which will lead to unintended consequences. Because our students will not. We've seen how students have been harassed in Stellenbosch, and female students being attacked and shot and being arrested.
Okay, Anonymous, you're calling us from Vereeniging.
Hello, good afternoon.
Yes, afternoon, sir.
Okay, yeah. The way things are happening there, it's a pity, but now the Minister of Higher Education, Bled Zimande, knew exactly what was going on. As a parent, I paid the school fees and everything else, and I'm expecting to pay. I mean, I sympathize with my children, and they won't be surprised seeing parents as well getting into that, because I cannot wait for my children seeing what is happening there. I've got the children. I mean, my children being beaten like that, and now we say, okay, right. I mean, they are fighting for their rights.
Okay. Thank you very much. Prof, what is the way forward?
I think the way forward is, at the risk of sounding very simplistic, is very clear. Recapitalization and further funding of the higher education system in its entirety. And that includes also, if we're going to continue with the fees, that means that NEFSAS must actually give adequate funding. Because as we sit now, NEFSAS doesn't necessarily give adequate funding. Right. And then there are people who should qualify for NEFSAS, who don't qualify for NEFSAS, but don't get enough to be able to send their children to universities. So here we need a big rethink about how we fund our higher education system.
Do I get an idea here, Prof, that you actually, as the academia, you are very happy that the students are protesting?
No, we can't be happy about a crisis and a challenge in our society. Why? Let me tell you why. Right now, what is happening now where students are not in class when it's about exam time, will have dangerous consequences.
Okay,
for their
hold it there. Let me take a call quickly here. Bupedi or Mupedi, you are in Mpumalanga.
Yes, good evening, Tabiso, and your guest in the studio.
Yes.
Comrades, we are very disappointed about the motherboard, which is the ANC. Behavior today. Even on Twitter, they are calling students hooligans. The very same ANC that we have been voting for the past 21 years, that has been promising us everything. But now, because the students are only asking for 0%, they are being shot with hand grenades and rubber bullets. The very same students that are in the institutions because they don't have money, they are being funded by NSFAS. Some of them, they cannot even get graduations because they've got their own NSFAS. So we are asking the motherboard, which is the ANC, to stop treating us like we are slaves in our own country. This is our country. We have fought for this democracy. Let us live there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mupedi. This seems to be some ANC affair. I get the feeling.
The ANC, it's a ruling party. It's a majority party in parliament. The ruling party drives policy in this country. And it's the ANC that bails out everybody else who messes up. The SAPC, SAA.
What are you saying about us?
Now I'm saying the ANC, when there are problems in SAPC of money, the government of the ANC, they are able to bail it out. When there are problems in ESCOM, financial intervention, they bail it out. When there are problems in SAA, which is used by the elite, the poor people don't use SAA, they use a train, they use a bus, they use a taxi. It's bailed out by this government. Bail out education.
Okay.
Fees must fall.
Fees must fall.
Fees must fall.
Oh, that's the hashtag. Okay, let me quickly just go through our tweets here. Andy Lembete says, can the grievances of students be heard? Lives do not have to be lost in the process. It's quite absurd and it's being used by political parties to score cheap points. Fees increase next year. Why not protest next year? Madi Mujapelu Mutwaka. That is Mutwaka at Question Time 24. However, we've come to the end of our program. That was Question Time for today. A big thank you to my guests and to you for watching the show. Let's meet again next time. Have yourself a wonderful time. Goodbye.
The road to greatness is not an easy one. It's rough, tough, and full of barriers. And there's only one way to master it. Never, ever stop. Dauntless, the all-new Audi Q7.
My people, we are getting there, and thanks to you, Party is set to become our country's 12th official language. Here's today's word. Substitute. Replacing a drinking buddy with somebody more fun. That's more like it.
Get a bottle of Clipdrift plus 2 1-liter Cokes for only $1.19.99 and help make Party South Africa's 12th official language. Tops at Spar. Shake things up.
What is beauty? Is it a view that's been waiting for you for centuries? A setting that gives you goosebumps when you see it for the first time? Is it a moment that stops you in your tracks and leaves you in awe? Some people spend their whole lives looking for it. When you open yourself up to it, suddenly you find yourself in a place where true beauty isn't something you'll ever see. Because when you meet South Africa, you'll reconsider what you think you know.
SABC News. We report, contextualize and present news and current affairs honestly, fairly and fully. We consider it a duty to provide consistent